Coming up on episode 187 of Wheel Bearings, we've got some big show news to share. But first, we talk about our driving impressions of the Lincoln Aviator Black Label, Chevrolet Bolt, Toyota Camry TRD, Nissan Titan Pro4-X, and Cadillac Escalade. We talk about battery developments from GM and LG, and the Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. As usual, we finish up with some questions and our announcement. That's all ahead on episode 187 of Wheel Bearings.
Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. We've updated the Wheel Bearings merch store, and now there's a whole bunch of new choices, new colors, new styles, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, travel mugs, stickers, aprons, tote bags, you name it. You can get your Wheel Bearings merch at shop.wheelbearings.media. Go check it out. That's shop.wheelbearings.media.
This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abuel-Samich from Guidehouse Insights.
I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
All right, so let's get to it. We're driving cars. You know what? I'm going to go first. I'll take all the mystery out of it.
Good for you.
So I had the Lincoln Aviator Black Label this week, and I also had the Chevrolet Bolt. So let's start with the Black Label. The Aviator is a really beautiful klutz. That car is lovely inside. In my last experience with the Aviator, I think I also had a Black Label, and I felt the same way. It's just really nicely styled, both inside and out. The materials are really good. It feels luxurious. I absolutely despise the 30,000 way seats that are impossible to get comfortable in, although they massage you, which is a thing.
I do love those massaging seats.
My 13-year-old would get in the car
thing.
and he will jump in and he'll start hitting the screen. I'll be like, what are you doing? And he's like, I want a massage. I'm like, okay. And then he's like, here, turn mine on. I'm like, I don't want a massage right now. Like,
That's awesome.
I'm like, what did I do? He's like, you got to switch it to the passenger one. But he likes that. and just watching him navigate the sync system was kind of interesting too. Because they don't really make it easy to get at that setting, which surprised me. You have to go through you got to swipe 3 times to get to seats.
Actually, you know the easiest way to get to the massage setting?
Probably a voice.
If you just reach down on the side and hit the button for the lumbar inflator, and it'll bring that up on the screen.
Oh. Did it have them on the side or was it on the door? I don't even remember. Yeah.
No, it's on the side of the seat.
Okay.
On the outside of the seat.
Yeah. So anyway, Lincoln seats. I don't like those Lincoln seats. They're not comfortable for me.
You're just broken, Dan.
I am, both physically and emotionally.
You must be shaped like Quasimodo. I mean, I don't see how you couldn't find a position there.
It's just, you know what it is? It's one of those things, and like Rebecca was talking about a while ago with her chiropractor. It's that where the head restraint is, even when you back it off, they've figured out that you can back it off, and they have an adjustment that tilts the top of the seat back away again as well. All of those are okay, but maybe there's just too many settings. I don't know. In this platform, and even in the larger, the Expedition and Navigator, I like the Ford seats better because they're more basic and a little bit more limited, but they wind up being more comfortable. So maybe
there is too much of a good thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing.
Yeah, it's the tyranny of choice. When you do have that many adjustments possible, it can be you probably could find a comfortable position, but you end up trying so many different permutations that you end up just getting frustrated.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. And just even the lower cushion, how it's split, so you never have exactly the same support under your left leg as you do under your right.
That's in case one thigh is longer than the other. Well,
and honestly, humans aren't symmetrical, so
no, it's true.
It's probably makes good sense when you think about you should get it dialed in just right, but the amount of time,
and then you hit the memory button and you never touch it again.
Or you hit the memory button, you don't do it right, and it programs it back to like whoever had it before, which inevitably powers the seat back like a foot and leans the thing all the way back. Like,
that's my favorite. And all I can picture is them doing like driving along doing the white man's overbite from When Harry Met Sally.
So me and these seats don't get along. The rest of the car is, it's comfortable. It's beautiful inside. Like I said, the interior design, I like how Lincoln has staked out its own territory. It has its own look and feel. It's a little glitzy, which I think it kind of should be to a degree. It has enough of that classic Lincoln, like mid-century sort of bright work and look and feel, but the materials are really nice. The design is nice. The accommodations are nice, although it's, I don't know, the cargo area, if you use the third row, it's one of those cars that has 3 rows, but you either have to choose people or stuff or leave one.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 6 people in there, you're definitely not going to have enough room for 6 people's stuff.
Right. So the unfortunate thing with the Black Label, or with the Aviator overall, the Black Label is sort of the nicest one. So I'd like to try one that's not a Black Label to see what the real difference is in practice. But the unfortunate thing about the Aviator is that it doesn't really live up to its promise of being on a rear-wheel drive architecture in terms of a premium feel. It feels premium until you drive it, and it doesn't have that like premium driving experience. And I don't know if it was because of the 22-inch wheels or what, but it just feels clumsy. It doesn't ride as good as I would expect it to, especially with air suspension, and it doesn't handle crisply either. Like, it's just is it like it's, I mean, it sounds like it's just not very sharp. It sounds like it's kind of sloggy almost. It's sloggy. There it is. There's our word again. Is that word? It's got plenty of power. This has the 3-liter EcoBoost V6, which we'll be seeing now.
It's not an EcoBoost if it's in a Lincoln.
Sorry. What is it?
It's just a GTD, twin turbo GTDI.
Sure. But it's going to be in the.
You're such a geek sometimes.
What did they just came out with the Explorer? The Explorer SXT or something, right? That's going to have.
Well, I mean, Lincoln explicitly changed that a couple of years ago to help separate Lincoln from Ford. It is an EcoBoost V6,
right?
And you can find the same engine in Ford vehicles, but they just don't brand it as EcoBoost if it's in a Lincoln.
But GTDI is not. You can't brand an acronym, right?
I know.
So they should have called it Twin Force or something. And I think we've said this before.
Well, actually,
which is what
before
it was.
there was EcoBoost. That's what if you remember back 2008, or 2007, the MKR concept. They originally, that was the first time they talked about these twin turbo direct injected V6s before it came out as EcoBoost a couple of years later. And they called it Twin Force. Yeah. And that would be a great name for Lincoln to use.
I remember seeing the MKR.
I think triplets would be offended, though.
You think triplets would be offended? Well, I mean, it's.
Sorry.
I'm trying to come up with. I don't know. But it just doesn't. Like it costs like an X5. It on paper appears to compete with it. It certainly does visually and materials-wise inside, but it doesn't drive right. It just, I don't know. Something about it just doesn't feel like dynamically pleasing to me.
Were there different modes?
There were. There's like eco mode and excite mode.
Okay. And excite, really? I mean, I was just thinking of them. Well, again, it's not a Lincoln, but the Mach-E, there were such distinctive differences in the modes in that. But I don't think manufacturers do a good job of making those different modes really distinctive. Like they're rarely significant.
Given what they have to work with, there's not actually a whole lot they usually can do to really make them that different.
I think if you get them
you can change the weighting of the steering effort, and change the shift timing, and that's really about it.
And that's really about that's what Excite Mode did. Is it lowered shift points and wouldn't give you upper gears until you hit a certain miles per hour speed. It felt a little more aggressive. I think it actually tightened up the air springs a little bit too, or the damping, either or both. But it made it a little bit more responsive. But what I really wanted was a ride that was more compliant and handling that was it just felt like a handful to drive down a curvy road. Even in Excite Mode, like it just weight transfer was weird, and the big wheels. You could feel all that mass moving around and just not.
It was just a lot.
Yeah,
it sounds like it was a lot. Like it wasn't fun to drive.
Yeah,
it
was
all.
not fun to drive, and I kind of I missed out on my expectation of it being sort of fun to drive because they made a big deal about it being rear wheel drive based chassis that should be.
It's funny, when I did the launch drive in the Aviator, and you did too, Rebecca, out in California, out in Napa.
Yes, yeah.
It did not feel like that to me.
I know. I don't recall.
And I've driven one here since then. It's been probably a year and a half since I drove one. But it did not have that kind of feeling that you're describing. So I wonder if there was something out of sorts with your particular vehicle.
Maybe
could the larger tires have that much?
Yeah, I do wonder if it was the 22s on in the winter in New England on crappy roads. But
because I've driven it on the 22. I've driven the Black Label on the 22s.
I think we drove them in Napa, didn't?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the second leg, I think we had them. Yeah, I definitely don't recall having that sort of sloggy feeling of like I've got a lot of truck behind me.
Yeah, it was no fun. It was no fun to manhandle, which kind of made me a little.
How many miles were on it? I'm just curious, like how many people you think have driven it?
It's been around the block. I think it had over 10,000 on it. So that's
wow.
But that's not.
That's a lot of press miles.
I mean, it is. But the nice thing about that is that it's press miles. So that tends to confuse any algorithmic stuff that's going on.
Right.
But it also tends to break them in really well because the drivers are so varied. So you do get to sort of see how a car is going to settle in.
But that many miles, it kind of reminds me of a rental car, right?
Yeah.
When they say like if you get a rental car with 10,000 miles, it's more like having 20,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And granted, the cars that we are privileged to drive should be well taken care of and should be, maintained and all the wear parts.
They usually are until they get to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
No comment.
Where's Lucy? Where, Lucy?
I have no complaints about that. It generally doesn't really matter the mileage. They're always in good shape. The companies do sort of make sure that they're paying the fleets to maintain them, and the fleets do a good job. But the experience, I don't know. I'd have to try it again and really see, but I didn't find it as pleasing behind the wheel as I was hoping.
It's too bad.
So
what do you think of the Bolt?
So the Bolt.
Did you just have the regular Bolt?
I did have the regular Bolt. I thought for a minute it was the Bolt EUV, but it was just quote unquote the regular Bolt, which is I had a little bit of an interesting experience with it because it got here and I didn't have a chance to charge it. So the fleet facility is a ways away. So it got here. It had about 130 miles of range on it, and I needed to run to the office on one day last week, and I had the Bolt, and I needed to get there fast. So I kind of had a high average speed, and that ate quite a bit of power. And
how far is the office? I know
the office is 45 miles one way, so I did 90 miles round trip. And it ate a lot of fuel. But the funny thing too is when it got to me, its average energy consumption was like 2.6 kilowatts per mile, which is not good.
That's low for a Bolt.
That's really low.
Right. And so even driving it like an animal, that is now at like, I think it's about 2.9 or 3 miles per kilowatt, or 3 kilowatts per, or 2.9 or 3 kilowatts per mile, which is better. Like it was going up even as I was driving it rather aggressively. But the Bolt, on the other hand, is it's like one of those cars that you don't expect it to drive well, but it actually does. I really love the way they've tuned it. The chassis guys did a fantastic job. It's actually fun to drive. It's very responsive. It doesn't have Mach-E power like we talked about the last episode, but it's definitely got enough punch to get you in and out of any situation you're going to find yourself in. And it's pretty well disciplined. You do feel the weight of the batteries when you're pushing it, but it's nicely done, and it's just a good car to drive. So I liked that about it quite a bit. I know there's been complaints about the seats. I don't really have a problem with the seats. I can understand how they'd feel a little thin and crappy to some people. The backrests, I think, is probably a bone of contention. Because when I bend it into curves a little with a little bit of speed, you can sort of feel where the padding ends.
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh yeah, I can see how that would be annoying. But no, it's a great car. And then the next day, I had to do like the school round trips and dance class drop off and stuff. So I got back here and I had like 40 miles of range, and so I did the school drop off round trip. So that's 20 miles. And I, plugged it in. I only have 110. So it wound up like I did the rest of the day with a max of like 20 miles of range on it. And each trip was 10 miles out, 10 miles back roughly. So I sort of discovered that really like you can get by with about 50 miles of electric range most of the time if you're not doing something stupid like driving 90 miles back and forth to an office every day. It was fine. Like it did get a little upset with me the last trip out and back. It was blinking the battery indicator at me, and it's like performance reduced. And I was like, if I don't make it, I'm just going to make a phone call and wait for my wife to come rescue me. I'm just across town, but yeah.
Well, I think it takes a change in mentality to drive an EV. We've talked about it before, but I think I mentioned, somebody said to me, it's like driving with your low fuel light warning light on all the time.
A little bit,
right?
Yeah.
I think that was true. When we were talking like the first generation Leafs and things like that.
Right.
That had
exactly.
75 miles of range.
Yeah.
That's less true now.
Well, I think
it was
now he was just driving
true.
with his, this time, he's got a car that could go as far as any normal car, but he was just driving it around with the low fuel light on all the time.
Yeah, well, it was I
literally.
And I thought about like on Friday, I think it was Friday, just taking it in to the commuter rail station, just a couple miles away, and just like sticking it on the level 2, and I just didn't. But that would top it up quick. It's now been on the 110 charger for about 2 days. It says it'll be done on Tuesday.
And it's Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take it in, tomorrow probably. I'll just take it and plug it in for a while.
I think, I've always thought that range anxiety is really a misnomer. It's really recharging anxiety. It's how long is this thing going to take to recharge? That's, and especially now, like with, a lot of vehicles having 300 or 350 miles of range, it's more that just like, where am I going to charge it? That uncertainty, and how long is it going to take to charge? Because I know like when I had the Mach-E, it was going to be 4 hours at the public charger that I found.
Yep.
And it was 19 degrees outside. I'm not going to sit there.
Right.
So, that's more of the issue. But I still think that it does, for somebody to actually buy an EV, it does require a change in mentality. It does require moving beyond the familiar and saying that this is how I want to take on this perceived risk, or make these adjustments.
Yeah.
To whether it's committing to putting in a charging station at home, which is basically a gas station. Like nobody has a gas station at home because they're all over the place and it takes 5 minutes.
Right.
And so that's where, as we continue to evolve the infrastructure and the charging, my favorite thing still are those robots that Volkswagen is developing, where it comes to your car so you can park anywhere. The little guy comes to your car, boo, do, done. Goes back to his house.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, except, those are designed, for parking garages, not to necessarily, drive down the street to wherever you are, but rather when you're in a parking garage, So they'll have a dock where those things are, when they're not in use, they'll be sitting there plugged in, charging up, and then they'll come to your car and plug in and recharge your car while you're parked. I
wasn't thinking of it like on the fly refueling, like they're two, military jets.
Yeah.
But if you think about like at a grocery store or something, having those same kinds of charging banks like that, it adds to the convenience factor because right now people perceive charging as an inconvenience. Yeah, right. And so gas is a pain, but it's only a 5-minute pain. Charging is, a lot longer than that.
Well, and that's sort of, one of the things I spent some time doing was like, okay, well, where's the nearest DC fast charging that, I could see how the Bolt does on that. But they're like 25 miles away is the nearest Electrify America or EVgo. I think, stations. And, it's funny, like I went to the office, I knew I had plenty of charge to get there and to sort of hammer down to get there. It's like, if I run out of charge on the way home, fine, whatever. So I sort of had to make that mental calculation too. Like, I need to go and do this thing that's important. And then I'll figure out the rest of everything after. But if I were spending more time at the office, like I know that, our office is pretty close to in Chestnut Hill. There's the mall in Chestnut Hill and there's chargers right over there. The last time I was there, they've installed a charging station in the parking lot over there. So I could just plug the car in there and let it top up for a while and be okay. I wasn't at the office long enough. It was basically just go and drop stuff and leave. But that kind of like, you start to think about that, like where are the charging stations and are they high speed or low speed and what can the car do? Can the car do high speed or low speed? How fast can I get the most energy into this thing? So you have to know your hardware a little bit.
Yeah.
That's different. And that'll eventually change where you won't really need to care about it. But for now.
Well, and the thing is something like the Bolt, with a 259 mile range, I think what you experience shows that, 200, you only had half of the range to start with. If with 250 miles of range, you can basically do whatever you need to do. Okay. And for most situations, most people drive less than 30 or 40 miles a day. You plug it in at night, you're going to be topped up. You're going to be full all the time.
Right.
And you're generally never going to have a problem.
Well, that was kind of what I wanted to prove to myself on Friday as well, was like, look, I started off the day with like 30 or 40 miles of range, and by the end of the day, it had gone down a little bit. But every time I came back from whatever I was doing, I was plugging it back in. So I spent most of the day with 20 miles of range on the car. And everything I needed to do was within a 20-mile, out and back range. So I was like, you really don't need as much range as you might feel a sense of comfort with. But it's mostly to just make your feelings better.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to factor in, right now, if it was 3 or 4 weeks ago when the temperatures were a lot colder, and you were using the heat, you probably would have come back from your office, pretty much empty.
That's true. I did make sure that I was not running. I did shut off the HVAC. I was like, it's warm enough. It's been sitting in the sun. I don't need it.
Yeah.
My two biggest critiques of the Bolt was one, pedal driving kind of sucks in it because you have to actually pull the paddle. And so it makes it less smooth than it otherwise would be because you got to sit there and tinker with the paddle to adjust your decel for one pedal driving. And the A-pillar hit an entire F-250 at one point. I almost head-oned into a truck. I was on a curvy back road and all of a sudden, just the way the A-pillars are with the little quarter window and stuff, I was like, I'm just going to go over to the side of the road here because I don't know what's coming around this curve. And it took a little while for me to see the giant pickup emerge from the side. But the one pedal driving, I couldn't, it's not like you have a B mode or something that reaches hard.
There is. If you put it, you have to put it in low. You had a 2020, so it's got the shifters. If you put it in low, it gives you the one pedal mode.
But because it mimics like a low range on a transmission, I didn't get the same impression. Like I thought that's not the same. So I guess
no.
it's operator.
Basically, all putting it in low does is it just enables the one pedal driving mode.
Yeah.
So if you're in drive, you're not going to get the heavy regen unless you use the paddle. If you put it in low, you get the heavy regen without touching the paddle.
Okay, I'll have to go play with that and just see how it is.
The 2022s, the new ones that are coming out now, they get rid of that shift lever and they go to push button shift, and there's a separate one pedal switch. And if you press the one pedal switch, that's all you got to do. And then it actually remembers that each time you start the vehicle. So once you press it, it'll stay engaged every time you drive it until you turn it off.
Okay, because I like having the manual control, but also sometimes I just want it to be smooth, because you get to the point where you can anticipate and you know where to let off and regen yourself to a stop.
When you do have it in low or the one pedal mode, it actually is very smooth.
Okay,
you can modulate it very easily.
I'll go fiddle with that then.
Yeah.
Rebecca, what have you been wheeling around the wilds of Greenwich and the Merritt Parkway, which you mention all the time?
So I got a chance to drive the 2021 Toyota Camry TRD with a V6 engine in it, and it was actually a lot of fun. I was really pleasantly surprised. It's not that I don't like the Camry. I feel like I like the Accord a little bit better if I have to choose. But this thing was a riot. It was also this really cool, like they call it Ice Edge. It was this gray, that really cool like Kia Stinger gray that's like
the cement kind of
color? It's like a pale gray.
Yeah, it's like the China blue gray.
Yeah.
But this was a lighter shade. It was really beautiful. And then it had blackout rims and trim, had a cute little fin. And it was they just did a really, really nice job on the styling. And it's sort of the 3.5 liter it just brings back that sort of souped up Toyota feel that is missing, I think, from things like the regular Camry. And so, Dan, you were talking earlier about ride and handling and stuff. This thing really delivered. It was a riot. I mean, it was also very pure driving because the infotainment system sucked. And so I tried.
So you just had to focus on the driving.
Oh my, I had to, because I tried to focus on the Entune. I tried to do the Entune thing. That didn't work. It didn't have Android Auto. So it didn't have the navigation downloaded. It was only, this car had like 500 miles on it. So it was really one of the newer ones, obviously. But in some ways I was like, okay, fine, whatever. It was just fun to drive though. I mean, it really, really was. And I got a chance to I probably put about 150 miles on it, which is a lot for me lately. Yeah. And so it was just great. And, there was a good amount of room in it. It was really quite roomy. It was easy to get in and out of. We've spoken a lot lately about, different size people and different size cars. And this one, the Camry, the A-pillar is well positioned. Visibility is really good. It was a little bit stripped down from, the creature comfort standpoint. I don't believe it had heated seats. And if it did, I couldn't find them. It didn't have any of the, didn't have a heated steering wheel.
It does.
Again, it didn't have nav.
Doesn't mention heated seats. They are sport Softex trimmed front seats with red seat belts, stitching, and fabric inserts.
Yes. So no heated seats. It says that it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but we've talked about this before. This one did not. I will say for $32,000 plus another $500 for the two-tone midnight black metallic roof and rear spoiler. So, and then with our famous delivery, processing, and handling fee of $995, you get up to $33,680. I think it's a lot for this car, but at the same time, it was really, really fun to drive. If it was $5,000 less, I'd be all over it.
I don't know. I think that's a lot of car for the money. It's the V6. That V6 is punchy. It's the TNGA platform, which is decent to drive. It's a lot of styling.
It's a lot of styling.
It's kind of shouty looking.
A lot of creature comforts.
Yeah, that's true.
A 7-inch touchscreen. is not that big, and it's this awful black and red. It reminds me of DOS. Like it's just
I like DOS. I like command line. Like
So staring at that all week, I was like, oh, whatever. But again, it what was fun about it is it did bring me back to my roots. It is all about just driving, and that's what it was about. So from that standpoint, it was very fun. But there are a lot of vehicles in that price point that give you all that fun and all that ride and handling and twisties and all that good stuff, and heated seats and a decent infotainment system and technology.
I'm thinking of one right now, actually, and that would be the Kia K5.
Exactly.
Yes. And the K5 comes with the sounds of nature.
Yeah. And I think that the K5 feels more luxurious. It drives probably just as athletic. I was really impressed with it.
For sure.
Absolutely.
It's maybe not as quick. Yeah, that Toyota V6 is a great engine.
It is a great engine. It absolutely is. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great fun. I just, I think I'm just spoiled and kind of bratty in that
I will agree.
Want a nav system.
What do you think was the problem there? Was it just that it didn't have the right firmware or something? Or
yes, I think that it just hadn't been properly prepped and downloaded and such. So because again, like I didn't even have a map. I didn't have anything, and so I had Sirius XM and AM and FM, but it was like half of an infotainment system. And again, we run into this quite a bit, right? So I would be curious.
It was half of an infotainment system.
I would be curious though of if other people if any of our listeners or any of their friends have this Camry TRD, because the V6 engine was fantastic, but I would be curious what the infotainment system is like on, actually working.
Because the last Camry I had did have working Android Auto. This is usually more of a problem. A lot of the times the vehicles in the press fleet are pre-production models. They're pilot vehicles,
right.
And they're ones that were built before they get the okay to ship to dealers. And so, we do see some of these glitches in there, but, the Camry, has basically been around for a couple of years, in its current generation, I think 3 years now. So, there shouldn't be any issues like that.
There should not be. You're right. And again, it only had I think it had about 400 miles on it, maybe 450. Because then when they took it, it had I just rolled the 600 mark on it. But yes, but I think we've talked about Entune, not fans anyway.
Yeah.
But,
that's a given.
Right. So, but I do think that it was missing some kind of almost like standard equipment now, which is heated seats and even perhaps a heated steering wheel. But it had, all the other ADAS systems, the lane keep assist and everything. But most importantly, it had that 3.5 liter V6.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, many of the other trim levels of the Camry do have heated seats and steering wheel.
Yes, they do. They do.
And it's actually not unusual for a sport model like this, like the TRD,
right,
to drop some of those features.
Yes.
I mean, when we were shopping for our Civic a few years ago, they have on the Civic hatchback they have the Sport, and then they have the LX as the base model, the Sport, and then the EX and the Touring, and the Sport was based on the base LX, and so it didn't have the heated seats that were in the EX that we ended up buying.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that, as Dan said, it's a lot of style. You're buying style, and you're buying that V6 engine. But overall, I thought it was, it was super fun to drive.
Yeah, well, and you get all the charms that make the Camry the Camry. You need a decent trunk and room for people and.
Yeah, I mean the Camry is, it's a classic. I mean, it's a very, very good car overall. This just added that level of excitement and driving dynamics that you're not going to find in a 4-cylinder.
All right, so Sam, what were you driving?
All right, So I had a couple of vehicles since we left one off last week because we were running long, which is the Nissan Titan, the 2021 Nissan Titan. I had the Pro4-X 4x4 crew cab Titan, and a couple of year and a half ago, I guess Nissan did a refresh on the Titan. They tweaked the front end styling, and they did some upgrades to the interior. They dropped the XD with the diesel engine. So now there's just one engine, one powertrain option, which is the 5.6 liter V8, which is a great engine, 400 horsepower, 413 foot-pounds of torque. So it's got plenty of power, for a full-size truck. And, the Pro4-X, is kind of the off-road version, with big all-terrain tires and, four-wheel drive, locking diffs and all that good stuff. Four-wheel drive, low range. The Titan's a good truck. I'll give it that. I'll acknowledge that. It's way better than the first generation Titan was,
which is also an okay truck.
Yeah, it's got good driving dynamics. It looks decent. It's got lots of features. It starts the base rear wheel drive King Cab version starts at about a little over $36,000. This Pro4-X was almost $61,000. It had the roll bar on the back, and it had all kinds of other goodies. It had the tie down cleats in the bed, the park assist system, the Fender premium audio. It was good, not exceptional, but good.
That like $61K doesn't seem out of bounds for
it doesn't.
Pickups,
but for that kind of money, would I buy a Titan or like an F-150 Tremor or a Ram 1500 Rebel? I probably would not choose the Titan out of that group. Or the Silverado Trail Boss.
Why would you not pick the Titan?
I don't know. It didn't. It just didn't feel as good. The interior, while it's upgraded, it still didn't feel quite as nice. The screen. I've had my complaints about Nissan screens. This was better than most of the screens in Nissans, but it was fine, but not great. It just, the other trucks just seem, they feel, the user experience in them, the way they look and feel just feels better. They feel a little quicker off the line. And also they're oftentimes more efficient. This thing averaged about 14 miles per gallon.
I think that's the same issue that I had with the Tundra, right? It's like,
the very 80s of them.
It's rated at 17 combined. I got 14 out of it.
Yikes.
Which is not, and I wasn't, drag racing the thing or anything. I was just driving it normally, and it just didn't get particularly good fuel economy. The ride quality was fine. Not great. The audio system was good. It doesn't have things like on the F-150s, on the tailgate now you've got things like the molded in rulers and the clamp holes, to put in C clamps, to tie down, for as a work surface. You've got some of the newer trucks have some of these really well thought out features, which this one doesn't have. And granted, this one is like, I think 5 years into its life cycle now. So, it's kind of, at the point where, most trucks would be getting a redesign now. And, when this came out in 2015 or 2016, I think, most other trucks weren't offering those kinds of features. They are now. And so, if I comparing this to an F-150, I'd have a hard time choosing this over an F-150. And looking at the sales figures for this, I think the same is true for most people. I think Nissan sold about 23,000 Titans last year, versus I think close to 900,000 F series.
I was gonna say that's like less than a month of F series.
Yeah, I mean Ford sells about 80,000 F series a month. So
this is the.
I mean, the
issue-
thing is that
Go ahead.
anytime you're talking about a pickup truck and using words like fine,
yeah, I mean it's such it's such a competitive segment.
it is.
And the leading trucks in this segment are so good now that you have to be better than fine.
You do.
It needs to be much more.
And what was the price on this?
$60,640
Yeah,
including
and
delivery.
so it starts at 50. So, and that's what I was going to say is that it
for the
it
Pro
is kind of
4X.
expensive.
I mean, you
for the
can
Pro 4X.
you can get a 4-wheel drive, because all the Titans have the same powertrain in them, so you can get a 4-wheel drive crew cab for $40,000, which is competitive.
But the one that you were driving, right, is $60,000, and listen to the adjectives you were using to describe it. It's not okay.
No,
that's the thing. Is that
it's not enough.
And as you mentioned, the other brands are putting in all these emotional solutions for people, and they're really making it very human-centered design. They're making it how
you sound just like Jim Hackett.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. but that idea of how is our buyer using this truck?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. And all those thoughtful details really do make a difference, especially in the pickup truck market.
Well, I do think that with the Pro 4X, those things that you get are the Bilstein suspension and having an electric locking differential in the rear that maybe the rest of them don't. Like it does get.
They all do in these kind of off-road trucks.
So it's outfitted that way. It's almost like the Titan analog of maybe like the Trail Boss or like the
Trail Boss or the Tremor or the Rebel. That's the equivalent.
The thing that I really liked about the Titan the last time I drove one was it's friendly. It's funny. It almost has, car-like steering feel and decent dynamics, and it feels pretty good to drive.
Yeah. Well, and it always has. That's one thing I've always liked about this generation of the Titan is it does have good driving dynamics, but so do the rest of the trucks in this segment.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the problem, right? It's the competition.
Yeah. And I think too the thing that we have to remember is those domestic brands, Ford, GM, and Ram have robust fleet programs, and they sell a lot of their volume is not trucks like this. It's not just consumers,
Right.
It's
and I would say most of their volume is not consumers.
Right. So
certainly with the Super Duties, but even the light duty trucks like this, even at least a third of, or if not more, of the volume of those trucks is commercial customers, fleet customers.
Yeah, and I don't think that. So both Nissan and Toyota. I mean, honestly, 20,000, like that's just not good. But even the Tundra at I think it was 100,000 or so a year. They're not making money on that.
No.
Well, maybe they are because it's so old, but it took them a while. They're not a profit center like the F Series is, and I guess they're just like they're a different thing. They have a presence, and it's just harder for them to compete. I think they just don't have the mind share even. Do you think about this truck when you think about pickups? If you were
to be honest, no, I don't.
Right.
And that's the problem. I mean, it gets the basics right. The ride quality, the power, the performance, everything. It gets that stuff right. But that's table stakes to get into this segment. You've got to have that stuff. And, all of the, certainly, all the domestic trucks get those things right, So then, how do you compete? You have to have those other details. You got to get those those interesting details, that make it more functional for customers. And that's where this one kind of lacks. It just, I mean, and as you said, I mean, they don't sell very many of them, so they clearly, they can't afford to invest a huge amount in developing those details if they know that there's not going to be customers for them. So, how do you move forward if you're not going to make that investment in those kinds of details? So that's the Titan Pro4-X.
I like the Titan, and its numbers are like, it's competitive. It's just price wise, I feel like you're just not going to get the deal that you're going to get on someone else. So,
all right. So the other thing I had was the 2021 Cadillac Escalade, which this thing's just a beast.
I laugh because it's just like that is all the screen.
Yeah. Well, and
no, in the notes you have Cadillac Escalade Sport.
Yes. So a couple of years ago,
a misnomer.
A couple of years ago, Cadillac changed their marketing, their trim strategy for all their models, and with the introduction of the 21 Escalade, the redesigned Escalade, it adopted this Y strategy. So they have the base premium, the base, the premium, premium is the base model, and then premium, Lux, premium and Sport.
Yeah. It's very
and the premium, Lux, and Sport are priced the same. And it's one has a sportier look and feel to it, and the other one has a more luxury feel to it.
Oh, okay.
And the Sport, the Escalade Sport I had, definitely had the, looked like a Star Wars stormtrooper. It was the crystal white, the crystal white tri-coat, which looked fabulous for a white. And then the grille and all the trim and the wheels and the retractable running boards, all that was in black. So it
nice.
looked kind of sinister or as sinister as a white vehicle, a big white vehicle can be. But and I think you had it before, Dan. We talked about it, and we've talked about the Yukon Denali. I had that in December. They're these new GM SUVs are really well executed. They finally adopted an independent rear suspension. They've got great ride quality. The Escalade, I had the Magna Ride suspension, or the Magna Ride dampers. So it provides a great balance of ride quality and handling and body control. When you're driving down the road, on rough pavement, it does such a good job of the body control. You don't get any of that shake back and forth, the head shake. This thing is, the interior is fabulous on this. The displays, we've talked about this before. It's got 3 OLED displays, spanning 37 inches across. So there's a touchscreen display, small touchscreen on the left-hand side by the A-pillar, where you can switch back and forth some different modes and control the HUD and switch between the normal instrument cluster and the augmented reality instrument cluster, which I'll get to in a minute. On the right-hand side, you've got the big center touch screen for the infotainment, and then a big digital instrument cluster right in front of you. And the digital instrument cluster, one of the modes you can have on there, you can switch from replicating analog gauges to what they call their augmented reality display. And this is kind of a precursor to what's coming next year on the Lyriq, where when you switch it to the augmented reality display, what it does is it shows you the view from the front camera that's up in the windshield that's normally used for the lane keeping system. And then it overlays that, when you're using navigation, it'll overlay that with, the navigation prompts showing you like on the view, so as you're approaching, and I'm running a video that, on my screen, on my background right now that you guys can see. But, as you approach an intersection where you're supposed to make a turn, you'll see an arrow that appears to be floating over the intersection, exactly where you're supposed to turn. As you get closer, it gets bigger and bigger, things like that. This is, in principle, I think a really cool idea. And when they do it as a heads-up display next year on the Lyriq, I think it'll actually be great, because it'll overlay, right. It'll look like it's right on the road where you see the turn prompts. and it'll be, where you're actually looking, which is at the road. The problem with this is it's down in the instrument cluster. To see it, you have to be looking down instead of at the road, which is not a good thing. You should not be looking at that, except for glancing at it to see, how fast you're going. It's a really cool feature, but I think that they probably should have just waited until they have the AR heads-up display available, which, as I said, is coming next year on the Lyric electric crossover. And I suspect that they will add it to the Escalade next year as well.
It reminds me of, isn't it Honda that has that lane assist thing that shows up in the side mirror?
Yeah.
It shows up in the center touchscreen.
Yeah.
Right. But and it was more distracting than anything.
Yeah. Yep. That's how I felt about it too. I think, and I remember commenting about the AR display was like, it's an interesting idea, but it's distracting because of where it is. And if they put it in the HUD, I think it's going to be a lot more useful. It just, that requires either a larger HUD or they're not there in the Escalade yet. But otherwise though, we've expended a lot of commentary about screens on this podcast. How did you feel overall about just the amount of screen and how functional it was in the Escalade? Because it stretches all the way from the A pillar over to the other side of the center stack. Like, there's a lot of screen in there.
Yeah. So the small screen on the left by the A pillar, you're basically not really using that except just to switch modes in the instrument cluster and the heads-up display. So most of the time, you're never even going to touch that. The instrument cluster display is actually similar in size to most, modern digital instrument clusters. And, when it's in its normal mode, displaying the instruments, then it's great. It looks fabulous. The OLED displays, have really high contrast. They look really good, really sharp. They're very high resolution. And then, the center touchscreen, the infotainment display, again, I think it's like 16 inches or 17 inches. So it's a nice big display. It looks fabulous. And the UI, the current generation of Cadillac's user interface for their infotainment is quite good. And I like that it also has you can use it as a touch screen, Rebecca, for those people who like touch screens.
Thank you.
And but there's also a center controller, like an iDrive style controller, which has full jog functionality, so you can twist it, but you can also go forward, left and right, forward and back. And push down to select stuff. And I actually preferred using that because that center touchscreen is actually kind of a reach because it's up, it's all mounted up high on the dash. So it's close to your line of sight. And it's actually a bit of a reach to get to that. So I actually preferred using the center controller for that.
I like having options though.
Yeah, no. And I'm glad there are options. So, I think it looks great. It's really well done. And it's a really fabulous interior, and it's the kind of interior I would expect in an SUV that costs $112,000.
Oh, yours is more expensive than mine. Mine was $109,000.
Yeah. Well, this was the Sport Platinum. And the other thing,
but it has a cooler in it.
It does have a cooler in it.
Yes, I liked that. I thought that was cool. No pun intended. It definitely feels like a vehicle. I just wanted to point it west and keep going until it hit the ocean. It was that kind of car.
The one I had was equipped with the 6.2 liter V8. So you have just two engine options in the Escalade this year. The 6.2 V8, which is nice, powerful, small block V8, great engine, or the 3 liter inline 6 diesel. And interestingly, when you go through the build and price, they're both the same price. There's no price premium for either engine. So for the same price, you just pick whichever engine you want. It's the same price.
I'd really
Do
like
we
to
know
try
what the take rates are?
I would guess it's probably 5%.
Yeah,
maybe 10% for the diesel.
Yeah.
Actually, it might actually be a little bit higher for the Escalade. Because I think a fair number of people do tow with Escalades, and that diesel is such a nice engine. I drove it last year in the Sierra. It's a fantastic engine.
Well, it has the same exact. I think its torque is the same as the 6.2. The 6.2 has 460 pound-feet of torque. The diesel is also 460 pound-feet.
And it's a hell of a lot more fuel efficient.
Right. And I think
I got 14 miles per gallon also with the Escalade.
Yeah, but I just kept beating the hell out of that thing on every on-ramp because that V8 sounds so good.
It does. It does sound great.
The diesel gets, I think it's supposed to get like 28 on the highway, which is just pretty good versus I think 20 for the.
I think I got something like 24 or 25 when I drove it in the Sierra last year.
Yeah.
And isn't that the same one that's in the Suburban that I just had?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a 3-liter inline six.
Around Christmas. Yeah, that was what impressed me about that diesel was how quiet it was inside the vehicle, even really outside, but inside as well. Like, this is not your grandpa's diesel. Like,
it's very smooth. And if you like diesels, get one now, because a few years from now, you probably won't be able to buy one anymore.
That and supercharged V8s, now you're not going to be able to get them, so get them now. The thing that I realized too was this 6.2 has it has cylinder deactivation with dynamic skip fire and all that stuff. Totally seamless. The only way you could tell that it was doing anything was listening very carefully for the exhaust note. The first MDS systems or displacement on demand or whatever it was, cylinder deactivation. It was pretty smooth, but a lot more noticeable. And it would just drop down to 4 cylinders, and it was only the same 4 cylinders all the time. Like this, it can move it around.
This can shut off any of the 8 cylinders, up to 6 of the 8 cylinders.
It is awesome.
And the thing is, it's constantly juggling around, which ones are off. So it's not the same 6 all the time, or 4 or 2 that it's turning off. So even if it's running on 6 cylinders, only turning off 2, it'll be constantly switching which 2 it's turning off, so that it's not disrupting the balance, or it's minimizing the disruption of the balance and the sound.
Yeah, it sure works. It's good stuff.
Yep. It is good stuff.
All right. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk, because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
With so many options, Why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This past Thursday, Mark Royce, president of GM, did an interview with David Ignatius on Washington Post Live, talking about EVs. And one of the first things he talked about was this new partnership with a company in your neck of the woods, Dan, called SES. They were formerly known as Solid Energy Systems, and they're working on lithium metal solid state batteries. So just a quick primer, the basics of a battery. You've got two electrodes, a positive and negative electrode, a separator in between so they don't touch, because you don't want your positive and negative electrodes touching each other ever.
Short circuit.
Because bad things happen.
Touching.
That's right. No touching, because bad things happen.
No touching. Leave
and
room
then,
for the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and then it's all flooded with an electrolyte. And the...
But so hang on a second. Like, that's a battery. Like, that's
right.
Just a
that's a basic. That's the basics of a battery. Any battery.
So what makes them solid state?
So the electrolyte in most batteries today is either a liquid or a polymer gel, and it's an organic liquid. And so it's got carbon and oxygen in it. And the problem with that is, if you do have a short circuit in your battery, in your cell, and you get some contact, some touching between the positive and negative electrodes, that generates heat. That heat causes the electrolyte to give off oxygen, and if that heat gets out of control and starts a fire, that electrolyte is giving off oxygen that feeds the fire. Normally when you have a fire, like if you have some grease catch fire in a pan on your stove, if you put a lid on it, it'll consume the oxygen that's in there and then extinguish.
You don't want to put water on a grease fire, the same as you don't want to put water on a battery.
Definitely don't do that. Or, anytime, if you take a fire extinguisher, you put water on it, whatever, on any kind of fire, that smothering of fire is preventing it from getting oxygen from the air. Well, the problem with a battery, those liquid electrolytes actually produce their own oxygen. So even if you smother the battery, it's still going to have oxygen to feed the fire. That's why it's so hard to put out battery fires. It often takes hours to extinguish a battery fire. So a solid state battery actually replaces that liquid electrolyte with a solid material. And it's usually some kind of ceramic material. So when they manufacture it, they put in like a slurry or something, something liquid, but then it solidifies and it basically becomes a big block. And then that won't give off oxygen. It helps to prevent any short circuiting, things like that. So it should be safer. And in the case of what's being claimed by companies like SES and QuantumScape, which has an investment from Volkswagen, they're claiming double the energy density as well, because they're lithium, what they call lithium metal. And so most lithium ion batteries today have an energy density about 250 watt hours per kilogram. SES is claiming 400 to 500 watt hours, so double. The great thing about that, if you can double the amount of energy that's in a given weight or volume of a battery, you can take the same capacity we have today, like that Bolt you've got, Dan, has a 65 kilowatt hour battery. You could make that battery half the weight and half the size.
Or the same size and twice the capacity.
Or yes, so you could either double the range of the car, or you could reduce, keep the same capacity, because 250 miles is enough for most people, and reduce the weight. And that makes it more efficient, because you're not hauling around as much weight. Or if you want to keep the same range, you actually can, you can reduce the size of it, and get more range out of it. So there's all kinds of different combinations you could do, but it's going to make EVs both more functional and more affordable. presumably, if they can actually figure out how to manufacture these things, which is the thing that nobody's done yet.
They just have to put like a halon system on them too, so that they can just smother those fires. That's all.
Well, but if you have a solid state battery, you won't need to worry about that.
Yeah,
you won't need the halon. But so part of the announcement that they made, GM Ventures invested in SES back in 2015, and they've been working on this stuff. And now they're going to build a prototype production plant in Massachusetts, not far from where you are. And that's going to start prototype production in 2023. And, GM has talked about starting to roll out lithium metal cells as their next generation of their Ultium batteries, starting sometime around 2025 or 2026. So this could be a big boost for GM if they can actually get this stuff to work. And the same goes for Volkswagen with their partners at QuantumScape. And Toyota is also working on this stuff.
Yeah, QuantumScape is the one that I keep hearing the most about. Like, so I guarantee you they won't do full scale manufacturing in Massachusetts because that's not.
When they start to do full scale manufacturing, the battery plants will be closer to where the car assembly plants are.
Yeah. But it's anybody reading the press release, it's Woburn. It's not Woburn. It's Woburn. Okay. You got to say it right. It's a good place right off of 128. What do you think in terms of getting these cells like out in production cars? Like, is it 2 years, 5 years? I would say probably
10. five, at least 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Minimum. We may see some low volume stuff, in the next couple of years, but for the most part, it's going to be 5 or 6 years at least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, GM has made a big investment. Hopefully this plays out better than some of their other investments. Like we just watched like Nikola and
Lordstown Motors.
Lordstown Motors.
It seems like GM has sort of stumbled around and like they're like Sideshow Bob stepping on rakes. Just smacking themselves in the face.
I think everyone is. I mean, you know what? There's battery technology hadn't changed in decades. And then all of a sudden, in the last 10 years, we've seen tremendous changes. Yeah. So I think everyone is sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall.
That's true. I mean, honestly, like even now, they're not that far off from like what Volta was doing in like 1800 something,
Yeah, I mean it's not fundamentally different from the original batteries, at a conceptual level. They've changed the materials and the chemistry, so it's got a lot more density than it did, and they last longer than they did, but it's still conceptually the same as what we've had for 150 years. One more thing I want to mention about batteries. So we've been talking about EVs a lot, and how, California said by 2035, they want to ban the sale of new internal combustion engines, go EV only. I think Massachusetts plans to follow suit, and probably a bunch of other states will. And other countries are doing this too. One of the challenges with doing that, though, is we currently don't have anywhere near enough battery production capacity. Right now in the United States, we have roughly somewhere around 40 gigawatt hours of annual battery production capacity. That's enough for, about 400 to 500,000 cars a year. And most of that right now is with Tesla at their plant in Nevada. And then LG Chem has a plant here in West Michigan that has about 5 kilowatt hours or 5 gigawatt hours. But, at the pace we were at, up to 2019, when we were selling 17 million cars a year, if we converted all of those over to electric, we would need about 1.5 terawatt hours a year of battery production capacity to meet that demand. And that's about 40 times as much production capacity as we have today. So we need a lot more battery plants if we're going to do that. And LG announced on Thursday that they are going to invest $4.5 billion in additional cell production capacity here in the U.S. between now and 2025. They're expanding their Michigan plant, and they're building 2 other plants, and that's in addition to their joint venture with GM. So they're adding another 70 gigawatt hours of annual production capacity on top of what they're doing with GM with their joint venture with Ultium Cells, which has 1 plant under construction now, and they're planning on a second plant as well. So we're making some progress. There's going to be a lot more batteries coming over the next several years, and other battery manufacturers are also. SK Innovation's building 2 plants in Georgia right now. We'll probably see Panasonic add more capacity. Tesla's definitely going to do more. They're going to start doing their own, and Ford and even Stellantis have talked about building their own cells. So we'll see a lot more. We're gonna have to have a lot more battery production capacity if we want to make everything electric.
Well, is GM trying to position themselves as a supplier too? Like, is that why they're adding?
Not right now. They're just trying to meet their own demand. Because they have plans to sell a lot of EVs, and they're not. I mean, they have said that at some point in the future they could sell cells to other companies, but right now they're just trying to meet their own demand, their own internal demand.
Yeah, and God knows what Stellantis is going to do. They
well, on Monday of this week, in an interview, Carlos Tavares, said that they're going to be accelerating their EV production, and they're looking at adding their own cell production capacity.
I think one of the things that Stellantis really dearly wants to do is stop paying Tesla for anything.
Yeah. I just saw some sales figures for Europe earlier today, and in January, the top sellers of EVs, Volkswagen Group was number 1. Stellantis was number 2 for EV sales in Europe, because Peugeot actually has quite a few EVs that they're selling now, and Tesla was way down the list. They had like 3.5% market share.
When they start to produce all these batteries as well, the things that they're producing them out of are not necessarily the greenest either. So are we going to wind up in critical shortages of like just a different raw material, or everybody's trying to
that is a distinct possibility, and that's why everybody is scrambling to try to develop batteries that don't use any cobalt and eventually no nickel either. So they're trying to use more of materials that are more readily available and cheaper, like aluminum and manganese.
Yeah. There was another company here in Massachusetts, and this was like storage scale batteries, so big. Mm-hmm. And they were calling it colloquially the dirt battery. Basically, it's like if you want it to be as cheap as dirt, make it out of dirt. But I don't think that's anything that scales down. But it's trying to basically use the cheapest materials possible. Well,
and that's the thing. For stationary storage applications, weight isn't a problem,
right?
And energy density isn't really a problem. For a mobile thing like a car, you want to have as much energy density as you can, to keep the weight and the size down. But for something that's not moving anywhere, you can use stuff like iron phosphate, which has about half the energy density of nickel manganese cobalt cell, but it's a lot cheaper. But it doesn't matter because it's not moving anywhere.
Yeah, unless it's getting stolen.
Yeah.
All
right.
This is how it gets done, though. I'm excited to see where we wind up in 2 to 5 years with battery technology. Speaking of lots of mass and things that move, the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer was finally introduced. A while back, they introduced I guess it was the concept that basically.
Yeah, I think it was in like October of last year.
Yeah. When I was super excited for it, and then when you saw it, it was different than I thought it would be. And now the production version is essentially the concept with less gee-whiz technology. Still really nice. But Rebecca, you live in a rich town. Do you think anybody there is going to pay over
diverse town?
A diverse town. Yes, they have a diverse.
There's ridiculously wealthy and slightly less wealthy.
Right.
I will have you know that we just passed an ordinance dealing with blight in Greenwich. I have no idea where there's blight in Greenwich, but we have an ordinance.
Well,
for
they
it
just
now.
want to make sure that you never have any.
Right, they want to make
Being proactive.
Like, you can't come in here if you're blight. Like that's, we wouldn't let the train stop here so that the train people could get off.
Anyway,
So do you think anybody in that area is going to be okay with spending $100,000+ on a Jeep Wagoneer? Because this is the thing that I've seen as like a headline, like Jeep thinks it can get this kind of money from this vehicle, and I'm kind of like, well, I think they're not going to have a problem, but maybe it's just where I'm from. But like because I also live in a rich area. And
I was going to say, you live in a rich area too.
I live outside of a rich area. Let's be clear.
I think, I think there's a couple things. What's kind of fun about this is, the Jeep Wrangler is busboys and billionaires, right? You never know who's going to be driving.
And they're always spending a lot of money to like customize that one. Like they
are absolutely. But Jeeps in general are seen as in a very, very positive light. It's one of the few brands that doesn't have a quote target market or a well-defined customer, because from a demographic standpoint, because there's so many different people that buy them. So I like the fact that they have this in their showroom. They had to do something bigger than the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Like that is, it's a nice size vehicle, but they had to get a bigger vehicle in there. The pricing is certainly, very, very high. But
that's for the Grand Wagoneer, but because they also have ones that are going to start at, it's going to range from $40,000 for a base Wagoneer all the way up to $100,000.
So for sure. I mean, I was going to say though, you've got Jeep Wranglers that are 55, right. 60, 65,000.
We were just talking about an Escalade. It's 112. Yeah. So
so that $100,000 mark, is no longer sacred. That used to be the quote exotics, right? It's not anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose too, like, why do we need to feel like it's presumptuous for a domestic brand, and especially Jeep is a premium domestic brand? No matter which Jeep vehicle it is, it's like that's a Chrysler premium or a Stellantis premium line. Like that has some cachet, no matter which vehicle that logo is on. It's no longer like. Why should it be a bad thing for a brand like a hometown team to have a vehicle that is in that echelon, right? Like, I think that's actually good.
Well, and if you're looking at domestic brand prices, I mean, look no further than the pickup trucks,
right?
And how much people spend on their pickup trucks, So I think that there's real opportunity here. I can't say that. Like when I look at the styling,
I was gonna say, what do you think of the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer? Like,
I wish it had a little bit more Jeepness to it. Like, I don't know. I guess I'll have to see it in person again. I did get to the preview this past fall as well, but the front grille, I want it to be. It doesn't scream Jeep to me. It almost looks like a Lincoln Navigator.
Okay.
Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they've done a new interpretation of the classic 7-slot grill.
Right.
That's shorter and wider. Yeah, and they have the same thing on the new Grand Cherokee as well.
I digress.
Hey, I mean, gravity happens when you get older,
your vertebrae compress, you get osteoporosis that goes.
So I want to go to the moon. I just want to be 5'3" for like a day. But anyway, so I just think, I don't know. Can they sell these? Absolutely. Is it athletic enough? I don't know that it looks like a Jeep enough. But I could just be cranky.
Well, I hear you, especially as I was watching some of the running footage, and it looks weird in motion, but I think part of it is like it's a new thing, so we're going to have to get used to it. Right. Everybody has the most trouble with the rear and rear three-quarter view, where it just looks tall and, I don't know, kind of just not Jeepy enough, but it's a new thing, and I remember how sort of offended everybody was by the Cherokee when they reintroduced that, and it was different, and now it blends right in. It looks good. It's kind of a long-term, like, looking down the road vision where, like, what's going to look good still in 5 years and not be derivative. And I think they did a really good job there. I do want to I want to wait to, like, see it in person and see it moving around. But it to me, it kind of, like, it looked like a Jeep SUV superimposed over a Ram 1500. And I think that's just me mentally doing that and going, how does the Ram move and how does this styling sort of fit with that? And it's a weird mental exercise, but I don't know. I want to see it in the wild.
I will say the interior is spectacular.
I love the interior.
What I saw this past fall.
And I'm amazed they actually are offering the passenger side screen on the dashboard.
Oh, wow.
That's available as an option on the high-end Grand Wagoneers.
Well, they have, like, those filters like the all the lawyers use in their offices, so you can't see it unless you're directly on it.
Yeah. So across the front, I think it said something like 58 inches of display. There's, you've got the instrument cluster, the big 12-inch center stack display, and then another display over on the passenger side, and then a couple more displays. If you get in the back, if you get the rear seat entertainment, and then there's also another center touchscreen in the second row. In the high end Grand Wagoneers, to control your climate control for the back. It's just nuts how much
I
stuff
worry
they
that
put
it's
in
a
this.
little too screeny. With the front HVAC is also on a screen, and I will have to.
The HVAC controls, I think, are actually physical controls below the screen.
Oh, are they? Okay. I'm still just, like, paging through pictures because it looks like there is a lot of glossy touch surfaces.
Yeah.
In the cabin, but it's beautifully designed. I'm sure it's going to be beautifully outfitted. I can't wait to actually get in one and try it out as a fleet vehicle. The other thing that I don't want to get lost either is Stellantis is going to offer level 2 driving assistance, which I don't think anything they make has more than sort of basic ADAS right now. So that's new for anything in Stellantis's range.
Yeah, they're offering at launch. They're going to have a level 2 hands-on system, so it's kind of like what you get with Nissan's ProPilot Assist and Ford's Copilot 360, and actually Tesla Autopilot, which is also a hands-on system. Don't take your hands off the wheel.
I thought you could nap. I thought it was a napping system.
I was going to say hands on what?
Hands on the steering wheel.
Hands over your eyes.
And then the I think next year or sometime after launch, they're gonna start offering a hands-free system, which may or may not be a level 3 system, but it's definitely going to be a hands-free system, kind of like what you've got with Super Cruise, that lets you take your hands off the wheel, and that'll be available probably sometime early 2022.
And Fire TV. That was the other big thing.
Yeah, Amazon Fire TV.
No, I think it's a really handsome vehicle. I think they have to do it to expand the range. And, from what I saw, I think it's really, really cool. And I do think that it will draw people. It's a little bit like when Porsche came out with the Cayenne. How many people had a 911 and then a different branded SUV in the driveway, right? And then, but everyone, they wanted a two Porsche garage. I think that there's a lot of people that have a 7-seat or a large SUV with their Jeep Wrangler, and maybe they'll want a 2 Jeep garage.
The Grand Wagoneer offers you that option of the full-size SUV that you didn't, and the Wagoneer too. It's funny how I'm just going to call it the Grand Wagoneer, but it gives you that option that
the Wagoneer family.
You don't have the largest thing you could get previously, and it wouldn't even be a Jeep if you wanted 3 rows and the same basic hardware. You're looking at a Durango, and so now you've got the Grand Cherokee L, which is going to give you 3 rows in that form factor. And now the Grand Wagoneer, which is larger, frame-based, it's more of that traditional SUV, so you don't have to go defecting over to a Suburban or an Expedition, you can stay right in the family, and it's going to be nicer. It's probably going to have a higher profit margin than those because that's the Jeep thing. Only the Hemi. I know that it's got the.
They're launching with the two Hemis, the 5.7 and the 6.4, and then sometime after launch, by the end of the year, they will add plug-in hybrid as well.
Yeah, that's the one, and the more electrification FCA or Stellantis, I'm gonna screw that up for the next year and a half. The more electrification they can do, the better they're gonna be, because they're just big, and I don't expect it with the 5.7, even with e-torque, to get very good fuel economy. So anyway, that's enough of that.
I just dropped a picture in the chat of the interior. There is a row of physical switches below the touchscreen for the climate control.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I see that now. All right. Good. I'm glad.
We've got a question from a new listener. His name's Adam Jakowenko, who I don't think has ever written to us before.
Adam, all right, let's see what he has to say.
It says, "Hey crew, I had a feeling you missed me when I didn't email for a full episode, so I'm back. Now that I've just completed my
Hey Adam, I think you need to come on as a guest.
Absolutely. Now that I've just completed my recent car buying journey, it got me thinking about how every vehicle has some pros and some cons. There's no one car that has everything one person could want. So I thought it'd be fun to ask you all if you could build a brand new Franken car that'd have every modern feature that you valued the most. What would be in it? For the purposes of this exercise, I'm just thinking of modern tech, conveniences, quirks, and features. Thanks to Doug DeMuro, etc. Which features from which manufacturers would you love to pour into one magical unicorn car? Mine are below. Have fun. The Hyundai Kia blind spot cameras in the gauge cluster. Nissan's zero gravity seats, so comfortable. GMC's heated seat backs. Volvo's built-in Google Maps. Rear view camera from GM cars. I guess that's the camera mirror system. The panoramic roof like a Tesla or a Mach-E. Audi's satellite radio preview. It shows you what artist, song, or conversation topic is on each channel without you having to go to it first. And Volvo's B&O sound system. Tesla's Sentry mode. Hyundai's Smart Park. And the Toyota Venza's Magic Sky Roof, which seems like it might be a conflict with the panoramic roof. But anyway, so what would you guys want in your Franken car?
Oh, I'll have to think about this.
I could go one of two ways. I could be like, I want a Winnebago that handles that just has all the comforts of home and still handles really well. But that's, I think, probably unrealistic. I think my tastes are more simple. If I think of an idealized car, I actually don't necessarily think of those features. I think of something more elemental. So my idealized car is more like a Lotus Exige or something that's just you and the machine, and it makes you concentrate. I would like the sound deadening of like a Rolls in that car. It's funny. Like, I don't like light pollution in the cabin at night. I don't like screens. I don't like even the little lights that like illuminate the control. It's like, no, make it so I can do it by feel. I like switches, like hardware. I like manual transmissions and not a whole lot else between me and the vehicle. So my tastes are pretty simple. I want a car that's mostly a motorcycle.
I like.
So you want an aerial Atom?
Yeah, I would be okay with an Atom, except for winter.
With that, I like the ones with the bird's eye view camera system. Like where like if you're parking, you can see the whole. I love that. I think that's a really, really handy feature. And it's funny when he mentions the Kia Hyundai blind spot camera, that's what I was talking about earlier, was that it's in the gauge, it's in the cluster. It's not like the heads up display. I would love to have more things in the heads up display because, as you said, Sam, like your eyes are supposed to be on the road. But this is a great question, though. I'll have to think about.
I
want to think about some more.
I want our other listeners to think about this too, because it's a tough one to answer kind of on the spot. But
Right.
There are a lot of great tech features, and automakers do this, right? They look at what other companies are doing, and they sort of incorporate the good into, and they interpret it in their own way, but they sort of pull it all into their own lineups as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the exhaust note from an Aston Martin.
Yeah, all right, I'll take that.
Yeah, that would be probably my first pick. And yeah, no, it's a great question, and likewise, I would love to see some listener responses.
Well, I think what I would want is something like a Miata that has, an electric drivetrain, state-of-the-art batteries, so they're, relatively light. Just a set of good Recaro seats, with, the only adjustability it needs is, seat back angle and fore aft. Cause they always seem to fit me perfectly for some reason. Yeah, and that,
See?
I don't need any of this, any of the other stuff. I can get by without any of the other stuff. I would want, something like a Miata, with a 250 mile range, electric. Oh, and the soundtrack from a GT350. I want the Voodoo soundtrack.
Nice.
We are. I guess we're true enthusiasts in some ways. We get flustered when we start to talk about features. We're just like, I just want a car that drives well. But in terms of audio systems, I really like the ELS surround systems in Acuras. I'm starting to put that list together, so I think I'll have to come back to this. We should circle back to this next week, and maybe we can get some responses too. All right. My first instinct is just to be like, give me something that I really enjoy driving, so I don't care about any of the other stuff.
Okay. One more question. During a recent podcast, you guys discussed OTA updates. That's over-the-air updates. I bought a 2021 Honda CR-V a couple months ago, and it has wired Apple CarPlay. Salesman told me there was a possibility Honda would release a wireless Apple CarPlay update for my car at no charge. Have you guys heard anything about this? Do you have any contacts within Honda who could answer as to whether the wireless Apple CarPlay feature will be added to my car? So, Ray, I did reach out to Honda. I haven't heard back yet. But my guess is that the answer will be no, because they have not actually changed the head unit in the CR-V for a couple of years. In fact, since the current generation came out. And there are hardware differences that are required to go wireless with CarPlay or Android Auto. And I don't believe that Honda has added those to this. There are some, some of the newer Honda models, new Acura models are coming out with wireless CarPlay support, but I don't think that they're going to be able to add it with a software update to your CR-V, unfortunately. But
retroactively.
Yeah, not with just a software update. It's going to require a hardware change for that. But I will follow up with Honda on that just to make sure. So that's it for questions. Rebecca, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So, after just over 2 really fun-filled years, this is sadly my last Wheel Bearings podcast. And I'm going to miss it because I've had so much fun. I've had so much fun with the audience and watching it grow and gain in popularity. And it's kind of hard to believe because, so Sam, when you first asked me, I think my first show was in January of 2019.
I think so, yeah.
And then I promptly went to India.
Yeah.
and we
recorded a couple shows from there.
Exactly, which was so cool. And, the audience has been fantastic and it's just been so fun. And Dan, someday we'll meet in person. And, I was thinking back to like when we would sit in the car at the auto show and talk. And so I've actually accepted a new position. And so I can't continue with Wheel Bearings, unfortunately. I dragged it out as long as possible. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone because it really, really has been so much fun, and I appreciate everybody's interaction. And I'll still kind of keep up my Rebecca Drives Twitter feed a little bit. Again, I'm sort of feeling out like what's a conflict and what I am and not allowed to do. My job will be announced, I think, at the very beginning of April. For more details, it's under embargo still right now. But again, I've had such a great time. I think I did almost 100 episodes. I couldn't remember exactly.
Just about that, yeah.
Just about, yes. And so we'll have some new people though. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way we sort of expanded our knowledge with all of the unique understanding of the world that you bring to it. You know, you certainly bring a different perspective and a lot of different experience that, you know, what we were trying to do with Wheel Bearings in the first place was something that's not just two dudes talking about cars and chuckling at their own jokes, although we do our fair share. You know, having that understanding of, you know, we're trying to understand the cars, how they fit in the marketplace, who buys them, and the sort of ups and downs of that. So I appreciated the balance you brought to us. So hopefully we'll talk again soon once you settle in, and we'll get regular updates from the Rebecca-verse.
Yes, well, and I can be a special guest.
That would be fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. You are welcome back anytime you want. And Rebecca, I really sincerely want to thank you for joining us on this little adventure over the last couple of years. You know, you, as Dan said, you have been such a great addition to the show.
Thank you.
You know, really providing, you know, a very different perspective from the two of us, you know, both, you know, as a woman, but also, you know, just based, you know, your professional experience coming from a totally different point of view, you know, which I think has been extremely valuable to hopefully making this show both more fun to listen to and more informative.
Well, thank you. And I've learned a ton. I mean, really, you know, what's interesting, Sam and I have known each other for quite a few years now. But, you know, we don't get to talk technical, and I'm not good at technical. Like, that's what you're so good at. And so I've just learned so much of what's behind the vehicle and the perspective and such. So I'm really going to miss everybody, and please continue to listen. There's great things ahead for this podcast, and it's just been really a privilege. So thank you.
Yeah, just as we start to put some money in the bank.
Well, I'm terrible with money anyway. That's why I need a lot of it.
Yeah, no, we don't have any. We're going to actually try to take some of that money and add to some writers. I put out a call a little while ago for some writers, so we can pay people a little bit.
Yes.
And we'll give them some assignments, and we'll see if we can get some content moving and try to get a snowball effect and build the Wheel Bearings empire. So everybody gets to sort of
become
play
a true digital media company.
Well, that's the thing is like, I think that's part of our growth has been a little bit stumbly and scrappy, but you know, you see all the podcasts that are now, they're funded by large corporations, and we're trying to figure it out on our own and maintain all of that on our own and build an actual media company. So it's been a little slow, but it's been really interesting to sort of play around and pull the levers and see what we can make happen. So yeah, stick around. We'll have more news soon for a lot of different things, but we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
We love you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. I love you guys. Thank you.
All right. That's it for this week.
I'm going to go cry now.
Don't forget, you know, if you like the show, you know, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even if you don't use Apple Podcasts, that's like the most popular place for reviews for podcasts.
Yeah,
so go leave a review there anyway. And because it helps people find the show. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Wheel Bearings. Hey, we love to listen to our listeners, too. Drop us an email to feedback@wheelbearings.media with your thoughts, questions, or conversation starters. That's feedback@wheelbearings.media. You can also find us on Twitter @wheelbearingscast. Don't use any vowels except for the A in cast. So that's WHLBRNGS cast. Thanks again. We hope to hear from you soon.